what did Khris Middleton have to say?
Well, obviously, look, all, preamble aside, Sunday is the deadline for players to, if you want to buy out, you have to be released by Sunday, March 1st to be eligible to play in the playoffs for another team. So there's been a lot of conversation this week, a lot of curiosity. So this was Khris Middleton's first Mavs home game. I did see him briefly in LA because I was at the last game before the break when the Mavs and the Lakers played the no Luka, no Cooper flag game, and just flat out asked Khris, has he made a decision yet? And he said, still weighing his options, still conferring with his representatives at Excel Sports, Mike Lindemann, his longtime agent there. There's interest in Khris Middleton. I know Denver would love to get him. I think other teams have registered interest, and it's going to be a matter of, does he want to force his way into a buyout, or does he want to finish the season as a Mav? The rumbles to this point, these are, rumbles pre-tonight, and I'm not going to sit here and ask him about rumbles. The suspicion is, or the leanings were, that a buyout was probably unlikely, but we saw today that Minnesota. Sorry, guys, my voice is gone, and of course I have no water with me. We saw today that Minnesota maneuvered to get Kyle Anderson, and so there are playoff teams that are going to come after him and try to convince Khris Middleton to push for a buyout, and it's really going to be up to him. What does he prefer? Would he rather finish out the season in Dallas, or does he want to join a playoff team for the stretch run? It's the Mavs have made it clear that it's going to be his call. Whatever he wants to do, they're good with.
So there are some financial implications if Khris Middleton takes a buyout. Obviously, he loses his bird rights. Yep. There is a pretty large cap hold associated with his contract, but that would allow the Mavs to go over the salary cap to sign him, or he could sign via an exception with the Mavs or any other team. Whereas if he does accept the buyout, then he's just a total free agent, no bird rights, no nothing, and he loses a little bit of leverage. That aside, Mark, why, could you explain why a player at his stage of his career that's already won a title, that would maybe want to win another one, obviously, before he retires at some point here over the next 5 years or whatever it is, what incentive would he have to want to stay in Dallas? Is it purely financial, or is it, hey, he gets the promise of a lot of playing time and a chance to maybe, build up his value ahead of free agency? Or what is the reason for him to want to stay here specifically?
I think the bird rights that you mentioned are important. That's not insignificant. And also, I think you have to factor in, he was traded at midseason last season when he went from Milwaukee to Washington. He was just traded from midseason. He was just traded at midseason from Washington to Dallas. Does he want to make another in-season move, which would be the third in 2 years? And, I don't know the answer to that question. I didn't want to, I wasn't going to ask him 79 questions about this and keep pressing him, because he didn't have to engage with me on this. And he, I've always loved covering Khris Middleton, loved talking to him. And, he was great about, he knows that there's a lot of interest in what he might do. So, we only talked for a few minutes. So I can't sit here and tell you that I know where he stands on every single aspect of this decision. But obviously, in-season moves in general are not fun. There are always family considerations. So I genuinely don't know how it's going to turn out. Again, I think, he's going to have his choice of multiple teams if he wants it. And it really will just be a matter of, is it worth making sure, is it worth getting another playoff crack, or is it better to preserve his bird rights and keep that contractual status and take it into the offseason? Because look, I don't think the Mavs know exactly what next season's roster is going to look like, or even how the whole offseason is going to play out. I think lottery obviously factors into that hugely, what kind of pick they end up with in the lottery and what kind of player range they end up in. But is it conceivable that Khris Middleton would be asked to come back next season in, a vet role? We need a shooter off the bench. I mean, I think yes. So there's a lot to it's an interesting one. There's a lot to figure out here in the next 2-3 days.
How quickly would a decision need to be made with the time frame that is at play here?
Interestingly, it's not like a normal waiver where you have to be waived 48 hours in like sometimes when you see like January 7th, contracts are frequently guaranteed on January 7th, and you'll see a flurry of players waived on January 5th because they've got to clear waivers 48 hours before January 7th. That's not the way the playoff deadline works. As long as the Mavericks waive him Sunday, which is March 1st, even though he wouldn't clear waivers, obviously, until 48 hours later, he would still be playoff eligible for the next team he joins. So this thing could go all the way to Sunday. And the way these things work is the interest comes in from the other teams. You're basically picking the other team and then going to the Mavs and saying, yes, Team X has expressed interest in me. I want to join them. Please wait. You got to negotiate the buyout figure as well. And, typically what is reduced is the amount that he would receive from the next team. Now, again, that's a negotiation. That's not always how it goes. But I guess the short answer is this could go all the way to Sunday.
And to your best knowledge, which suitors could potentially be as you?
Denver is the only one that I have confirmed, but I believe there are more than that.
Okay. Well, interesting decision for Khris Middleton coming up here over the next couple of days.
What is chat saying? I see comments, but I can't read them.
So I'm reading, we posted a poll. Do Mavs fans hope that Middleton stays with the Mavs or goes on with the new team? Mark, he was probably the reason why they beat the Pacers. He was really, really dang good in that game. And so, I think if Mavs fans want the team to tank, then, the fewer good players on your team, the better. But I'm kind of with you because, if they're able to finagle a way to keep his cap hold in the summer while still having access to exceptions and move some money around and do things in orders in a way where they don't have to bring him back like on the mid-level exception, they could just bring him back using bird rights. I think he's a super valuable player. Whether he's off the bench alongside Clay or if it's like something happens with Clay. I don't know if their positions overlap, Middleton and Clay, but I do think he's a good player. I think he's got a lot left in the tank.
At any point this season, did we ever say, man, the Mavs have too much shooting? I don't remember us saying that.
Yeah, no, never. So it's a really weird situation because it's much easier to keep Middleton than it is for the Mavs to keep Bagley. Like it's possible to keep Bagley, but you'd have to do some suboptimal stuff, I think, using your exceptions. Whereas with Middleton, you could just keep him. You could just re-sign him and just boom, you're good.
Yeah, because Bagley's kind of playing himself into possible real money.
Yeah,
going into.
But then there's the other side of this coin, which is the Mavericks wanted to convert at least one of their two ways, and they don't have a roster spot to do so. So that will be the silver lining. If Khris Middleton decides that there's a playoff opportunity he wants to go pursue, the Mavs then would at least have one roster spot. And again, this is not confirmed reporting. This is just my read, my anticipation. I think Nebhard would be the more likely candidate to be converted with Moussa Cisse. I could see them wanting to retain him and offering him a two-way again for next season. That's my anticipation or my read. There's a lot going on this week. And so we have to, unfortunately, I don't have the whole picture tonight, but I knew that I was going to try to get the best picture I could tonight. And this is the best I could do.